The envelope came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. It was beige, elegant, sealed with gold wax her style. I didn't need to open it to know what it was. I recognized the handwriting instantly, even after 3 years. 3 years since we broke up. 3 years since I watched her walk away with eyes full of tears and lips trembling with words. She never said, now. She was getting married to someone else, and she wanted me to be there. I should have thrown it away. I should have laughed. I should have felt nothing. Instead, I sat down, held the invitation in my hands like it was something sacred, and read every word, twice. Evelyn Harper and Noah Walsh request the honor of your presence at their wedding. Noah. She used to joke that if we ever had a son, she'd name him Noah. I stared at the card until the ink blurred, my fingers cold. The rain tapped against the window like it was uncertain what to say. That night, I poured a drink, then another. I looked through old photos, our trips, our smiles. A video of her laughing in the snow, cheeks red, hands buried in a scarf I had given her. That laugh could bring cities to their knees, and it had once made me feel invincible. We met during our senior year of college. She was studying literature, always walking around with a book half the size of her torso. I was the quiet one who preferred music over people. Our first conversation was about Kafka. She laughed when I said I found him overrated. I like people who think differently, she said, and that was it. From that moment on, Evelyn Harper became the center of my world. We weren't perfect, but we were in love. We moved in together 2 years after graduation. A small apartment in Brooklyn, cracked windows, peeling paint, but it was ours. We danced in that kitchen. We fought in that kitchen. We planned a life. Our dreams scribbled on napkins. Paris in spring. Adopt a golden retriever. Bookstore with a coffee corner. She taught me how to speak when I only knew how to stay silent. And I taught her how to stop overthinking everything. We balanced each other, or at least, we thought we did. But balancing is not the same as growing. And then, one day, she stopped smiling. It didn't happen overnight. Love doesn't always explode. Sometimes, it fades, silently, like sunlight slipping behind clouds. I was working more. She was writing less. The distance wasn't measured in miles, but in silences. She asked me one night, "Do you think we're happy?" I said yes. I lied. I didn't know how to fix what we had. I thought time would. I thought love meant staying, no matter how painful. We stopped kissing goodnight. We stopped waiting for each other to come home. She'd be asleep with the light on. I'd sit in the kitchen and scroll through old voicemails just to hear her laugh. She left in November, left her books, her scarf on the doorknob, and a note I never finished reading. "Please don't hate me." It said, I didn't. I hated myself for letting her drift away. And now, 3 years later, she was inviting me to her wedding. I didn't know why I went. Curiosity, masochism, closure. Maybe I wanted to see her one last time before she became someone else's forever. The venue was a garden by the lake. White chairs, violin music to perfect. I arrived early, sat in the back, watched people I didn't know take pictures, laugh, hug, smile. Then she walked down the aisle, radiant, hair in soft curls, veil flowing like mist. And when she saw me just for a second, her smile faltered. But she kept walking. I watched the ceremony like a ghost, like someone who no longer belonged to any of it. When the vows came, she looked at him the way she used to look at me. It broke something inside me I didn't know was still unbroken. The road home felt longer than I remembered. Maybe it wasn't the distance, maybe it was the weight in my chest. I drove without music, Just the hum of tires on wet asphalt and the occasional hiss of passing cars. Every so often, I'd glance at the empty passenger seat and imagine her sitting there again, fiddling with the heater, singing off-key to some song I hated but learned to love because she loved it. Once, we had taken a road trip to Vermont. She'd fallen asleep with her head on my shoulder at a rest stop. I had taken a photo. I found it that night, still in my phone, still glowing like it had just been taken. I pulled over, not because I was tired, but because I couldn't keep driving through the fog of her ghost. Back home, I found myself unlocking the storage box at the back of my closet. Inside were remnants of our past, old movie stubs, faded Polaroids, a broken guitar pick, and her leather-bound journal, the one she always carried, the one I promised never to read. But she wasn't mine anymore, and maybe the promises no longer applied. I opened it, November 3rd. I think I'm going to leave soon. I love him, God, I do. But I feel like we're trying to hold together something that's already burned down. Another entry. He plays the same song over and over again. I know it's for me, but I can't listen without feeling like I'm breaking his heart every night I stay. Her handwriting had always been messy, all curves and urgency. But here, it looked shaky, tired. I didn't feel abandoned anymore. I felt understood, and that somehow made the pain sharper. I started writing letters, not to her, but to the version of her I used to talk to at 2 a.m. The version who wore my hoodie and danced in the kitchen barefoot. I saw someone with your laugh today. It wasn't you. But for a second, I believed. I wish I had asked you how you felt more often, not assumed, not filled the silence with comfort. These letters piled up, dozens, some in envelopes, some just folded once and tucked away in drawers. They became my way of bleeding gently, without the mess, without expectation. 6 months passed. Spring came with its stubborn optimism, the kind that forces cherry blossoms to bloom even when the nights still feel like winter. I was at a bookstore, her favorite one. I hadn't meant to go there. My feet just carried me. That's when I saw her mother. She was standing by the poetry section, flipping through a copy of Neruda. She smiled softly, almost sadly. She still has the song you wrote, she said. I nodded. She played it the morning of her wedding. She asked me not to tell you, but I think you deserve to know. You mattered, maybe more than you'll ever understand. I didn't know what to say, but maybe words weren't needed. I don't visit our old apartment anymore. Someone else lives there now, a young couple. Judging by the fairy lights and new doormat, I don't write letters as often either, but sometimes I still dream of her. In those dreams, we're not in love anymore. We're not hurting. We're just talking, sitting on the roof, watching city lights flicker below. In those dreams, she asks me, do you think we did our best? And I always answer, yes, because I think we did. And sometimes, that's enough. It's autumn now. The air smells like burnt leaves and fading time. I walk the streets we once held hands on, not to remember, but to let go. There's peace in that, in walking forward while carrying the echoes of someone who once meant the world. Sometimes the greatest act of love is simply releasing the person you once held onto with everything. And though she'll always be a chapter in my book, I've stopped trying to rewrite the ending. I let her go, not because I stopped loving her, but because I finally loved myself enough to stop waiting. Months passed. The seasons shifted like chapters in a book I was still learning to read. I moved to a new apartment, smaller, quieter, with a view of the river that curved like a secret outside my window. A year had passed since Evelyn's wedding, since I stood in the back of a white garden and watched her marry a man who wasn't me. Since I drove home with ghosts in my passenger seat and let her go, not with anger, but with grace. I had learned how to live alone again, slowly, like recovering from an injury you can't see, but feel every time you breathe deeply. The apartment by the river had become a kind of sanctuary. My mornings were quiet, tea instead of coffee now, less caffeine, more calm. Books had returned to my shelves, so I had plans even if half of them were always dying. I didn't think about Evelyn every day, but sometimes when the sky turned gray around for PM and the wind made the windows moan, I remember her not in pain, but like the smell of something that once comforted you, like lavender on a wool scarf. It started slowly, like all things worth anything do. Clara and I saw each other a few more times, mostly unplanned. The same cafe, the same bookstore, a quiet hello, then conversation that stretched like warm sunlight across a wooden table. One day, she invited me to a gallery outside the city. I didn't hesitate. I packed us sandwiches. She brought thermoses of chai. We drove 2 hours through roads flanked by fading autumn to a town neither of us had been to. We didn't talk about past the day. We talked about art, about why trees still try to grow even in bad soil, about how some people carry silence like armor. And when we sat on a bench overlooking a pond, she turned to me and said, "You carry your sadness so gently." I didn't know what to say, so I kissed her, and she kissed me back. Clara took a photo of me once without warning. We were on her balcony. I was watering her succulents, barefoot, holding a chipped mug that said "Be kind." She showed it to me later. "You look like someone who's forgiven himself," she said. It was the kindest thing anyone had ever said to me. I asked her to send it to me. I printed it, framed it, not because I thought I looked good, but because I wanted to remember how that moment felt. One afternoon, while at a thrift market with Clara, I turned a corner and saw Evelyn. She looked older, not tired, just more grounded. She was wearing jeans and an oversized sweater, holding a small potted basil plant. Our eyes met. She smiled. So did I. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. She looked past me, saw Clara waiting by a vintage bookshelf, and something in her expression softened. And then she nodded, a simple gesture, not of approval, not of goodbye, but something in between. And then she walked away. Clara never asked me to explain what Evelyn meant. She never pressed for names or timelines. Instead, she said, "I don't need to know how many times your heart was broken. I just want to know how it beats now." We build a new rhythm together. No grand declarations, no future fantasizing, just everyday tenderness. Dishes in the sink, lazy Sundays, the smell of rosemary when she cooked, me humming again when I showered. This time, love didn't feel like holding on. It felt like exhaling, like I had been underwater for years and didn't even know it. I never replied to Evelyn's last letter. Until now. It wasn't long. Just a few paragraphs, written in the quiet of a rainstorm. "I loved you fully, and I let you go fully too. Thank you for being my storm, and for making space in me for this calm." I didn't mail it. I burned it page by page. Watched the words lift into the air and disappear. It felt like breathing. The silence in my life used to ache, now it breathed. Clara and I moved in together, slowly, piece by piece. A toothbrush, a sweater, a copy of a book she wanted me to read. We didn't call it moving in. It just became true. There were moments when I still flinched at the sound of an old song, at the scent of lavender, at the shape of a memory too sharp to touch. But she never asked me to erase them. She just made sure they didn't echo too loudly. 1 year later, we stood on the same bridge I once released a paper boat from. This time, Clara stood beside me, fingers laced with mine. She had folded a new boat, painted little stars on the sides, on the bottom. and her neat handwriting. It read, "There's still more sky." We placed it on the water together and watched it drift into the horizon. They say when you find peace, you stop bracing for storms. But no one ever tells you storms come anyway. It had been 2 years since I last wrote Evelyn's name, since Clara and I stood on the bridge and let a painted boat carry our hull downstream. Since I stopped looking back, life had settled into a rhythm. Our apartment smelled like cinnamon and rosemary. Clara's art hung on the walls. My guitar stood near the balcony door, often played, never dusty. Some nights we cooked in silence. Some mornings she danced while brushing her teeth. It was calm. It was easy. It was love of a different kind. Grown, not struck like lightning. So I didn't see it coming. The first argument was over something small. I forgot to pick up something from the store. She said it wasn't about that. I said, "Then what is it about?" She didn't answer. Later that night, she sat on the windowsill, hugging her knees. "You don't open up like you used to," she said, and I wanted to scream. I've never known how, but instead I said, "I'm trying," and I was. But grief leaves stains you can't scrub out, and sometimes healing looks a lot like hiding. It was Clara's idea to take a trip, a week by the coast. Just us, no distractions. On the second morning, while walking a seaside path, we passed a couple sitting on a blanket. The woman looked up. "Evelyn." It was a moment, a flash, a shared nod. Her partner handed her a strawberry. She bit into it and looked away. I didn't say anything to Clara, but I didn't sleep that night. Clara noticed. She always did. A week after the trip, she asked, "Did something happen while we were there?" I hesitated, then told her the truth. She didn't cry, didn't scream. She just said, "I'm not afraid of your past. I'm afraid of the way it still lives in your silence." And I knew she was right. One morning, I found a letter on my pillow, in Clara's handwriting. It wasn't a goodbye, but it wasn't a promise either. Love isn't about never hurting. It's about choosing each other after the hurt. But I can't keep choosing for both of us. She had gone to stay with her sister. She said she needed space, not from me, but from the version of herself that kept waiting for me to catch up. The apartment was quiet again, the kind of quiet I used to crave. But now it felt different, hollow. I sat with myself. I read old letters. I reread the one Clara left. I played my guitar without writing songs. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called a therapist, because maybe Clara didn't leave to escape me. Maybe she left to remind me I still hadn't faced myself. Therapy wasn't magic. It was slow, agonizing, revealing. I talked about Evelyn, about Clara, about how I mistook stillness for safety, about how I wore silence like armor. Let go of Evelyn, my therapist said, but you never fully arrived where you are. It made sense. I was always halfway somewhere. Halfway healed. Halfway here. 3 months later, I saw Clara again. She was reading in a coffee shop we used to go to. I didn't walk in. I watched her from outside for a while. Then I walked away. Because love isn't always about asking for someone back. Sometimes it's about becoming the person who deserves them, even if they never see it. I didn't find someone new. Not right away. I didn't go chasing stories. I rebuilt. I started writing again, not letters, but stories, songs, dialogues with the man I used to be. I went hiking alone, volunteered at a music workshop, cooked without waiting for anyone to come home. It wasn't lonely. It was becoming. Love changed me. Loss changed me more. But I wasn't broken. I was still here, still breathing, still healing. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the quiet anymore. Spring came again. Not the kind that bursts through the door with flowers and laughter, but the kind that knocks gently. The kind that asks permission to bloom. It had been nearly a year since Clara left the letter, since I started choosing myself for the first time. I had rebuilt slowly, honestly. I still had her mug in the cupboard, the one that said "Let it steep." I never moved it, never used it either. It was there, like the echo of a door that never slammed. It was early on a Thursday when I got it. I'm back in the city. Would love to see you. No expectations. Just coffee. Just honesty at sea. I stared at it for a long time. My heart didn't race. It pulsed steady, strong, aware. I replied, "Tomorrow. The cafe with the yellow chairs." She replied one word. Perfect. She was already there when I arrived. Same table, same hair, shorter now. Same smile but gentler. Like it had traveled far to return. We didn't hug. We just sat. "Hi," she said. "Hi." She stirred her tea. I took a breath. "How are you?" "Better," she said. "And you?" "I'm here." "That's not nothing," she smiled. We talked for an hour. About the ocean, about books, about how we still remembered each other's coffee orders without trying. She didn't mention the past. Neither did I, because some healing doesn't need revisiting. It just needs presence. 2 weeks later, we met again, then again and again. Not dates, not declarations, just company. We sat on a bench one evening. It had rained earlier. The world smelled like second chances. She turned to me and said, "I never stopped loving you. I just couldn't carry both of us anymore." And I said, "You weren't supposed to." She rested her head on my shoulder. I let her. The sky didn't erupt. No dramatic music. Just breathing. Just soft. I wrote it after she left that night. Left it on her doormat. "Clara, you were the first person who saw the cracks and didn't flinch. The first who stayed even when it wasn't easy. The first who left not to punish me, but to remind me I deserved to do the work. I don't know what we are now. I don't know what we're becoming. But I know I'm ready to grow beside you, not behind you. If you stay, I'll meet you in the middle. Always." She never replied in words. She showed up the next morning with a mug that said "Let it steep" and the toothbrushes. It's been 4 years now. We're not perfect. We still argue about laundry, about movie choices, about how I never refill the ice tray. But we talk, we show up, we pause, and every year on the same day, we walk to a new bridge, different city, different view. We fold to paper boats, write one thing we're afraid of, one thing we're thankful for, and we let them go. Not to forget, but to remember how far we've come. We bought the house 3 years after she came back. It wasn't big. 2 bedrooms, a small porch, a garden where nothing grew at first. But it had a blue door, her favorite color. She painted it herself on the first week, laughing when I accidentally stepped in the can. We weren't newlyweds. We weren't wide-eyed dreamers. We were the people who had already broken apart once and chose, every day, to stay whole together. That made it better, more real. Marriage wasn't magic. Some nights we went to bed angry. Some days I forgot to say thank you. But we learned to speak, even when our words trembled. Clara had a rule. No silent treatments. No unfinished apologies. I had a habit. I wrote notes when I couldn't speak. Left them on her pillow, in her jacket pocket, next to the tea kettle. One said, "I didn't mean to sound distant. I just got lost inside again. Thank you for waiting at the door." She always waited at the door. It was a Tuesday. She had gone to visit her parents. I was cleaning the shed when I got the call. A drunk driver, a highway curve, her car, a hospital. By the time I arrived, she was unconscious. The nurses said she might wake up. They said it could take hours or days. I sat beside her for 73 hours. I counted down. Every hour, I whispered a story. About us, about the blue door, about the paper boats. I told her I'd fold 1,000 of them if she'd just wake up and tell me my folds were crooked. At our 74, her eyes fluttered. At our 75, she said, "You still don't crease the corners right." I cried like I hadn't in a decade. She reached for my hand. "I heard you," she said. "All of it." Recovery was slow. She walked with a limp for a while. I took a break from work, cooked more, read to her in bed. We fought less, laughed more. There's something about almost losing a person that makes every mundane moment feel holy. Like her yawning mid-sentence, or me brushing her hair, or the way we'd hold each other longer than necessary, just because. On our 5th wedding anniversary, we went back to the river. She was walking fine by then, stronger than ever. We carried a box of paper boats, exactly 1,000. I had spent the whole year folding them. She didn't know. Each one had a line from our story, a word we loved, a fear we had let go. We released them at sunrise. The river sparkled with our memories. I thought love would settle, like dust. But with Clara, it never did. It grew, softly, fiercely, quietly. Even now, years later, we still leave notes. She still paints our doors blue, and every now and then, we find each other all over again in burnt toast and over water plants, in silence that holds hands with peace. We were never perfect, but we were present, and we never stopped choosing.